He promised to love her till death do us part. But a shocking insider report, complete with what sources claim is a draft of a disturbing legal document, reveals he was much more interested in what happens after they part. This isn't just a story about love, lies, and reality television. This is a story about a meticulously planned long-term investment where one person's life is considered an asset, and their death is the moment that asset matures. We are about to pull back the curtain on what could be the most chilling and calculated deception in 90-Day Fiancé history. The story you think you know is just the cover. We're here to show you the fine print. This is the kind of story the mainstream channels are too afraid to touch, but it's a story that must be told. If you believe in uncovering the truth, no matter how dark it is, and if you're tired of being fed the same sanitized narrative, then you've found the right channel. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and give this video a like to help us fight the algorithm. You are now part of the investigation. To understand the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the scheme we are about to expose, we must first travel back. We must revisit the narrative we were all sold, the narrative of Sumit and Jenny. A love story for the ages, we were told. A story of defiance, of cultural barriers being smashed by the sheer force of their connection. Jenny, the hopeful American woman, leaving everything behind for a younger man in India. Sumit, the devoted son, torn between his family's traditional expectations and the love of his life. We watched them for years. We saw the tears, the arguments, the clandestine meetings. We witnessed Sumit's great deception, the secret wife he had hidden from Jenny, a bombshell that should have ended everything. But it didn't. Their love, we were led to believe, was stronger than lies, stronger than betrayal. We watched as Jenny, time and again, forgave him. We watched as Sumit, inch by painful inch, fought his family, enduring their threats of disownment, their emotional blackmail, all in the name of being with his one true love. He chose Jenny. He married Jenny. The fairy tale, against all odds, had come true. Or so it seemed. But what if that entire struggle, that entire years-long drama, was not the story but the setup? What if the family's epic disapproval wasn't an obstacle to their love, but a crucial ingredient in Sumit's long-term business plan? What if every tear, every fight, every dramatic proclamation of love was simply a performance, a way of building a narrative so compelling, so tragic, and so valuable that it could be cashed in at a later date? We are now receiving information from a source deep inside the Sumit and Jenny camp, a source who was hired to curate their public image, to manage their social media, and who in the process stumbled upon something so sinister it compelled them to risk everything to bring it to light. This source, who we will refer to only as the insider to protect their identity, was not just a paid employee. They were fans. They believed in the story. They were hired to help the couple monetize their Instagram, to engage with their followers, to keep the brand of Sumit and Jenny alive and profitable. It was a dream job, working for a couple whose love story had captivated millions. But that dream, according to the insider, quickly became a nightmare. It started with small inconsistencies, the public persona versus the private reality. On camera, for their social media posts, Sumit was the doting, adoring husband. But behind the scenes, the insider reports a different man. A man who was less interested in Jenny's day-to-day happiness and far more interested in their brand engagement, their marketability, and their story's longevity. He would allegedly review their social media analytics with a cold, detached focus, discussing Jenny's age not as a fact of their life, but as a demographic hook. He would talk about their narrative arc as if he were a television producer, not a husband. The insider began to feel a creeping sense of dread. This wasn't a man in love. This was a man managing a valuable piece of intellectual property, and Jenny, it seemed, was the main character. The breaking point, the moment that turned suspicion into terrifying certainty, came with the discovery of a single file on a shared computer drive. It was a file name that seemed innocuous at first. Legacy Protection Agreement Draft. The insider, assuming it was related to their will or estate planning, something normal for a couple their age, thought nothing of it. But curiosity born from weeks of growing unease got the better of them. They opened the document, and the blood in their veins ran cold. It was not a will. It was not a simple estate plan. It was a contract drafted by a Mumbai-based entertainment lawyer, a contract that was, in no uncertain terms, a transfer of ownership. It was a document designed to be presented to Jenny Slatin for her signature, and its contents are the most ghoulish and predatory thing our source had ever seen. We have been briefed on the key clauses of this document, and they are chilling. The document, which we will now refer to as Sumit's death contract, begins with a series of whereas clauses, preamble text meant to set a gentle, loving tone. It talks about their unique and globally recognized love story, the legacy they have built together, and the need to protect that legacy from outside exploitation after one of them passes on. It's all couched in the language of love and protection. It's designed to sound like Sumit is being the thoughtful, forward-thinking husband, looking out for their shared story even beyond the grave. But then comes the operative text, the legal jargon, cold and brutal. Clause 1 stipulated that upon the event of Jenny Slatton's death, Sumit Singh would become the sole and exclusive owner in perpetuity throughout the universe of her life story, image, and likeness. Let's break down what that truly means. Sole and exclusive owner. That means no one else, not Jenny's children, not her grandchildren, not her siblings, would have any say. Sumit and Sumit alone would be in control. In perpetuity, throughout the universe, that means forever. Not for 10 years, not for 50 years, forever. The rights would be his until his own death, at which point they would pass to his heirs. Her story would belong to his family, the very family that tormented her, for all of time. And the most terrifying phrase of all, life story, image, and likeness. This is not just about writing a book. This gives him the power to sell the rights for a Hollywood movie, to authorize a Netflix documentary series, to approve a stage play, to sell her image for use in advertisements. It would give him the right to use her photographs, her voice recordings, even in this day and age, to authorize the creation of a digital or holographic version of Jenny for use in future media. He would own not just her story, but the very essence of her identity. And then comes the financial clause. The contract explicitly states that all profits, royalties, and fees generated from the exploitation of these rights would be the sole and exclusive property of Sumit Singh. All of it. Every single dollar from the book deal, every penny from the movie rights, every cent from the documentary streaming revenue, it would all go directly to him. Her children, the people she raised, would see nothing. Her legacy would be his payday. This was not a legacy protection agreement. This was a posthumous asset transfer. This was a business document. Jenny's life was being packaged as a product, and her death was the trigger for the transfer of ownership. The theory, which the insider claims is proven by this document and a series of email exchanges between Sumit and the lawyer, is this. Sumit Singh has been playing the long game from the very beginning. He endured his family's wrath because he knew it added drama and value to the story. He waited years to marry Jenny, building the tension, making the audience invest more and more into their will they or won't they saga. He knew that the most valuable chapter of their story would be the final one, the tragic end. The lonely widower left to tell the tale of their great impossible love. He was securing the rights to be the sole narrator and the sole beneficiary of that tragedy. The contract was the final piece of the puzzle. It was his insurance policy, his retirement plan, built on the foundation of her life and activated by her death. The insider reports that Sumit's plan was to present this document to Jenny not as a cold legal contract, but as a romantic gesture. He was allegedly coached by the lawyer on how to frame it. He would tell her, "This is to protect us, my love. When you are gone, I don't want your children or my family to fight over our story. I don't want anyone to twist what we had. This way, I can make sure they tell it right, the way we lived it. This is my final promise to you, to protect our legacy." It is a masterful piece of emotional manipulation. He would be using her love for him and her fear of his family's interference as the very tools to get her to sign away her own identity. He would position himself as her eternal protector, while in reality he was acting as a corporate predator securing a valuable asset. This theory reframes everything we've ever seen. Think about it. The constant financial instability, the reliance on Jenny's Social Security income. Was this a genuine struggle, or was it a calculated decision to keep the narrative of the poor, struggling couple alive? A wealthy Sumit doesn't fit the story. A dependent Sumit, a man who gave up everything for love and now relies on his older wife, is a much more sympathetic and ultimately more marketable character. He wasn't avoiding work because he was lazy. He was avoiding work because his full-time job was managing the Sumit and Jenny project. His role was to be the romantic lead in a story he was producing, directing, and secretly planning to profit from. Consider the age gap, the element that has always been at the forefront of their story. The world saw it as a romantic novelty, a testament to love knowing no bounds. But in the cold light of this death contract, The age gap becomes a business calculation. It's the actuarial table at the heart of the conspiracy. He is 30 years younger. Barring a tragedy, he was always going to outlive her. Her death was not a possibility, it was a statistical certainty, a predictable event on the timeline of his investment. He wasn't just marrying a woman he loved, he was acquiring a property with a known expiration date, after which its value could be fully realized. It's a ghoulish thought, but one that the existence of this document forces us to confront. He wasn't just counting their days together in love, he was counting down the days until he could cash in. The insider alleges they found emails that confirm this cold, calculated mindset. In one exchange with the entertainment lawyer, Sumit allegedly asks, "Please confirm that this agreement supersedes any and all previous testamentary documents Jenny may have signed in her home country. It is essential that her children have no standing to challenge my exclusive control." This is not the language of a grieving husband trying to protect a memory. This is the language of a corporate takeover. He is actively seeking to disinherit her children from their own mother's story. He wants to ensure there are no rival claimants to the intellectual property he is about to acquire. He is closing loopholes, not protecting a legacy. In another email, he allegedly discusses the market potential of their story, specifically referencing post-mortem media opportunities and the importance of having a single authoritative voice to guide the narrative. That voice, of course, would be his. This brings us to the reckoning. The plan was perfect, the contract was drafted, the manipulative speech was rehearsed, but he made one critical mistake. He underestimated the person he hired to polish his public image. He gave the insider access. He let a believer into the inner sanctum, and that believer saw the truth. They saw the cold, hard reality behind the romantic facade, and they couldn't live with it. The insider, at great personal and professional risk, copied the file. They took screenshots of the damning emails. They knew they couldn't just go to the press. It would be dismissed as a disgruntled employee's fantasy. They had to get the information to the one person who could stop it. They had to get it to Jenny, in a move that sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller. The insider used an anonymous email account to send the entire package, the contract draft, the email exchanges, and a simple, clear explanation of what it all meant, to a close friend of Jenny's in the United States. They included the name of an American intellectual property lawyer who could be consulted, urging the friend to get this information to Jenny immediately, before Sumit had a chance to present his romantic proposal. The email's subject line was simple: "The truth about Sumit's plan. Please read this before it's too late." The bomb was sent. The countdown had begun. The reckoning was no longer a future possibility, it was an active chain of events. Imagine Jenny Slatton, living her life in India, believing she has finally found her happily ever after. She has weathered the storms. She has faced down the family. She is married to the man she loves. And then she gets a frantic call from her friend back home. A call filled with confusion, horror, and disbelief. A call followed by an email. She opens it. And there it is, the legacy protection agreement. Her life, her story, her very identity, laid out in cold legal terms as a piece of property to be transferred to her husband upon her death. She sees the name of the law firm, she sees the clauses. Sole and exclusive owner. In perpetuity. All profits, royalties, and fees. And then she sees the emails. Her husband, Sumit, discusses her as an asset, discussing the need to cut her children out, discussing the market potential of her death. This is the moment of confrontation. Not with Sumit, not yet. This is the confrontation with the truth, the chilling, horrifying realization that the last decade of her life might have been a lie. Every loving word, every sacrifice, every tearful reunion is now cast in a sinister new light. Was any of it real? Or was she just the star of a show she didn't know she was in? A show produced by her own husband, where her final act was already written, and her death was the trigger for the credits to roll and for him to collect his producer fee. She is forced to confront the idea that the man sleeping next to her, the man who calls her his wife, has already planned the business of her passing. He is not just her partner in life, he is the speculative investor in her death. Her life isn't a shared experience, it's a valuable story, a copyright he is patiently waiting to inherit. The fairy tale has collapsed, and in its place is a cold, corporate-structured horror story. The document has been leaked. The truth is in her hands. The charming prince has been revealed as a predator, and the castle is a cage. The first part of this nightmare is over, but the second, the confrontation, is about to begin. What happens when Jenny, armed with this terrifying knowledge, finally looks her husband in the eye? The entire foundation of their life is about to shatter. The silence in their small Indian apartment must have been deafening. Every object, every photograph on the wall would have transformed from a cherished memory into a piece of stage dressing, a prop in a long and elaborate play. Jenny Slatton, holding the digital evidence of her own life being packaged for sale, was now a woman adrift in the wreckage of her own story. The first wave of shock, a tidal wave of pure, cold adrenaline, would have been followed by the desperate, grasping tendrils of denial. It couldn't be true. It had to be a mistake, a prank, a cruel forgery designed by a bitter ex-employee to tear them apart. She would have scoured the document again and again, her eyes blurring, searching for a loophole, a sentence she had misread, anything that could offer an alternative explanation. But the language was precise, brutal, and unambiguous. It was a corporate document written for the transfer of an asset, and she was an asset. Then, the emails. His words. Not the loving, sometimes stumbling English of the Sumit she knew, but a different Sumit. A Sumit who spoke of testamentary documents, exclusive control, and market potential. A man who strategized with a lawyer about how to secure the rights to her life story and cut her own children out of the picture. This was the true poison. The contract could be explained away, perhaps, as a misguided attempt at protection, the product of bad legal advice. But the emails revealed the intent, the cold, calculating mindset behind the legal jargon. They were the proof of his forethought, of his meticulous planning. This wasn't a sudden, foolish idea. This was the culmination of something that had been growing in the shadows for years. Every loving text, every video call, every shared meal was now suspect. She was forced to ask the most soul-destroying question a person can ask. Was any of it ever real? This is the point where the insider's trail goes cold and our exclusive theory, based on psychological profiling and an understanding of long-form manipulation, must fill in the blanks. Jenny, a fighter who has battled his family and a culture she didn't understand, would not have simply collapsed. After the initial shock, her survival instincts would have kicked in. She had to know for sure. Following the insider's advice, she would have contacted the American lawyer, a specialist in intellectual property and entertainment law. Picture that phone call. Jenny, her voice trembling, trying to explain the situation, feeling foolish and hysterical as the words come out. My husband, there's a contract that says he owns my life story after I die. And then the lawyer's calm, professional voice on the other end of the line, a voice that cuts through the emotional chaos. The lawyer would have asked her to forward the documents. An hour of agonizing silence would pass. Then the phone would ring again. The lawyer's tone would be different now, sober, grave. Ms. Slatton, he would begin, I've reviewed the draft agreement and the email correspondence you sent. I need you to listen to me very carefully. This is not a legacy protection document. In my professional opinion, this is one of the most predatory and morally unconscionable personal contracts I have ever seen. He would then proceed to dismantle Sumit's potential defense piece by piece. He explained that the terminology used, in perpetuity, throughout the universe, sole and exclusive owner of life story, image, and likeness, is standard language for a major studio buying the rights to a best-selling novel or the life story of a global icon. It is not, he would stress, language used between a husband and wife to protect a memory. It is the language of a complete and total buyout. He would explain the financial implications in stark terms. This document, if you were to sign it, would give your husband the legal right to produce or sell to the highest bidder a movie about your life. It would allow him to authorize a book where he is the sole narrator of your story. Your children would have no legal standing to object, even if the portrayal was inaccurate or deeply hurtful to them, and they would not be entitled to a single dollar from any of it. He is, in effect, attempting to have you legally disinherit your children from their own mother's memory. The lawyer would confirm that the email discussing the superseding of her American will is the smoking gun. It proves this was not about protection, but about circumventing her existing wishes and seizing total control. It was an offensive move, not a defensive one. The call would end with a stark warning. Do not sign this document under any circumstances. And Ms. Slatton, I would seriously reconsider the safety of your situation. Armed with this terrifying validation, Jenny's world would have solidified into a new, horrific reality. The denial was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. The man she loved, the man she had sacrificed everything for, saw her not as a partner, but as a long-term investment, a human stock option. and he was just waiting for her to mature. Now comes the hardest part, the confrontation. She couldn't just pack a bag and run. She was in his country, in his home. She had to face him. She had to hear the lies from his own mouth. We can only imagine the scene. She would wait until the evening, the time they usually spent together, watching TV, talking about their day. The sheer normalcy of the routine would be a form of torture. He would be his usual self, charming and attentive, completely unaware that she held the key to his entire deception. She would choose her moment. Perhaps he would say something about their future, about growing old together. And in that moment, the hypocrisy would be too much to bear. She wouldn't scream, she wouldn't cry, not yet. Her voice would be quiet, dangerously steady. Sumit, I need to ask you about something. She would turn her laptop toward him, the legacy protection agreement glowing on the screen. A friend of mine who is a lawyer saw this. They said I should ask you what it is. The initial moments of his reaction would be the most telling. A flicker of confusion in his eyes, quickly replaced by the dawning horror of recognition. He would see the file name, the formatting, and he would know he was caught. The mask would slip, just for a second, and in that second, she would see not her loving husband, but a panicked strategist, a cornered con man searching for an exit. And then the performance would begin. Phase 1. Feigned ignorance and misunderstanding. This, baby, what is this? Where did you get this? He would act baffled, hurt that she would even possess such a thing. When she held firm, he would shift his tactics. Oh, this! Yes, I remember. This is the thing the lawyer sent, baby. It is nothing. It is just lawyer talk. You know I don't understand these big English words. He was just trying to protect our story, our legacy. I told him I wanted to make sure no one could ever tell lies about us after we are gone. He would laugh it off, trying to make her feel foolish for worrying, trying to paint it as a comical misunderstanding between his simple intentions and the complicated world of law. He would try to shrink the document's power, reducing it to a silly piece of paper he barely understood. But Jenny would have been prepared for this by her lawyer. She would hold her ground. The lawyer explained the words to me, Sumit. It says you would own me, my story, my face, and all the money would go to you. Not to my children, to you. This is when Sumit would move to phase 2, the emotional appeal, the gaslighting. His expression would shift from confusion to deep theatrical hurt. Own you? Jenny, how could you say that? After everything I have sacrificed for you? I fought my family, my country, my own parents for you. I chose you. And you think this is about money? You think I want to own you? The tears would well up in his eyes. He would talk about his undying love, about how the thought of a world without her is so painful that he wanted to build a monument to their love, a story that he could guard for the rest of his lonely life. He would twist his predatory planning into an act of profound romantic grief. I was doing this for us, Jenny, to protect our memory. Can't you see that? The person who sent you this? They are trying to destroy us. They are twisting my love into something ugly. He would try to make her the villain. He would accuse her of betraying him, of having no faith in their love, of believing an outsider over the man who gave up everything for her. It would be a masterclass in manipulation, designed to make her feel so guilty and confused that she would drop the subject and apologize for ever doubting him. But then, she would play her final card, the emails. What about this, Sumit, where you asked the lawyer to make sure my will wouldn't matter? Where you talked about my children having no standing? Where did you talk about the market potential of our story? There would be no escape from this. These were his words, his thoughts, his strategy, laid bare. This is the moment the entire performance would shatter. He would be exposed, stripped of his romantic excuses, left with only the ugly, undeniable truth of his intentions. What would he do then? Would he confess? Unlikely. Men like this rarely confess. He would most likely escalate to phase 3, rage and blame. He would lash out. He would accuse the insider of hacking him, of forging the emails. He would create a grand conspiracy, a cabal of enemies out to get them, all because their love is so pure and threatening. He might even turn on Jenny, accusing her of setting him up, of never truly trusting him. The argument would be circular, maddening, and ultimately revealing. The more he would deny, the more he would prove the very calculated nature she now saw so clearly. With this contract as our lens, we must now look back and re-examine the entire Sumit and Jenny saga. Every key moment is now tainted, every obstacle reframed. his long-hidden first marriage? Was the reveal so dramatic and painful because it was a genuine shock, or because it threatened to derail the narrative project before it had matured? It was a plot point that ultimately added immense drama and sympathy for Jenny, making their eventual union seem even more triumphant. It made their story more valuable. And what of his family's legendary opposition? We all watched his mother, Sana, threaten, cry, and emotionally blackmail him. We saw it as the tragic barrier to their happiness. But what if it was, at least in part, a carefully managed piece of theater? Consider this even darker theory. What if the entire Singh family was in on the plan? What if they understood that a simple story of an Indian man marrying an older American woman had limited appeal, but the story of a man who defies his traditional hysterical family for a forbidden love was international gold? They created the conflict. They played the villains. Sumit played the tortured hero. Jenny played the long-suffering victim. For years, they built the drama, layering on obstacle after obstacle. His mother's threats weren't meant to stop the marriage. They were meant to increase the story's market value. Their eventual grudging acceptance of Jenny wasn't a change of heart. It was the beginning of Act 3. The final part of the plan would be for Sumit, upon Jenny's inevitable passing, to inherit the story rights. He would then produce the book or movie painting himself as the tragic romantic hero. And the profits, they would flow back to the Singh family. The ultimate irony would be that the family who publicly shamed and rejected Jenny would be the ones to privately profit from her entire existence. Her life would become their retirement fund. It is a conspiracy so vast and so cynical that it's almost unthinkable. But with the existence of Sumit's death contract, the unthinkable suddenly becomes plausible. Every financial problem they ever had on the show now looks different. His inability to work wasn't a sign of his struggle. It was a character choice. He needed to be the dependent, love-struck man, not a successful provider. Their reliance on Jenny's modest Social Security income was a crucial part of the narrative. It kept them relatable, sympathetic, and locked in a state of struggle that makes for good television and an even better biography. He wasn't building a career. He was building his character's backstory. He wasn't living a life with Jenny. He was conducting years of unpaid research and development for a future product. So where does this leave them now? The document is out. The secret is known. Jenny is faced with an impossible choice. Does she expose him? Does she go public with the contract, the emails, the entire sordid story? It would mean the end of her marriage, the end of the life she built in India. It would mean admitting to the world and to herself that the great love story of her life was a calculated fraud. It would be a public humiliation of unimaginable proportions. Or does she stay? Does she bury the secret, tear up the contract, and try to live with the man she now knows is a predator? Could she ever look at him the same way again? Could she ever trust a single word he says? A single touch, a single "I love you"? She would be living in a prison of her own making, constantly watching him, wondering if he's just waiting patiently for her to die. She would be a ghost in her own life, her only purpose to serve as the final chapter in his long and twisted business plan. This is the final dark twist in a story we all thought we knew. It transforms a reality TV romance into a gothic horror story. The villain isn't a meddling mother-in-law or a cultural divide. The villain is the charming prince himself, a man who allegedly saw his marriage vows not as a promise of love, but as the execution of a long-term asset acquisition strategy. He didn't promise to love her till death do us part. He was banking on it. Her life is his story, her death is his business plan. Is this the most ghoulish and calculating move in the history of reality television? We have presented the insider reports, the evidence from the documents, and the terrifying theory that connects all the dots. Now, the verdict is yours. Cast your judgment on Sumit Singh now. And if you believe these kinds of hidden stories need to be brought into the light, make sure you're subscribed, because the truth is always more shocking than the fiction they want you to believe.